What was it like watching it tonight, and is it the final cut?
I doubt it.
You're not supposed to say that. Is that your preferred cut?
I think that the replacement of the first night, that's where we see Christopher Lee in the garden and the snails and all that, is absolutely essential to the sense of the film. That's what's been cut out of let's call it the British version. It's called the theatrical version, but it's really the version that's been shown here over all these years. And putting it back makes sense of the film. So that I certainly think is very important. The bit that I wanted to take out and has been taken out was there was a great deal more on the mainland before the film really starts. Before there was sort of malarkey in the police station, making fun of Howie. In retrospect, having directed it myself, so I take the blame for that, I really thought it was quite unnecessary, because you get a perfectly good idea of what sort of person Howie is from the very first scene you see him with the old fisherman, and right on through the film. He doesn't need a sort of introductory scenes in the police station. So we have taken that out, and I think that is an improvement too. I think keeping the religious service in the very beginning, where you see him taking the sacrament, I think one possible change that I might make to the film now, but of course that is just, one keeps on having afterthoughts. That's
It doesn't sound like it's the final cut.
Is that I'm not sure that I would use the flashback to see that scene again.
Because we see it twice, effectively.
Yes, I can't see why.
Oh, you're only the director. I really don't.
And I suppose the maypole repeated twice is also slightly unnecessary.
But can't have enough maypole, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, indeed, why not?
More maypole.
But I don't think any of this makes any difference to the sense of the film, whereas the loss of the first night, which I think has been brilliantly reconstructed, did. I mean, to begin with that scene out, or those scenes where Paul Giovanni sings Gently Johnny, and we have the young man sent up for his initiation with Britt, tells us what kind of people these are. It tells us what kind of lord of misrule, if you like, which Christopher, I think, rather relishes as another title. What is to see him, in effect, conducting what is going on in his village with his tenants in that way. It's terribly important, because we understand where all the real players are and what they're doing, and we wonder from then on whether the detective in Howie will get the kind of messages that we are getting from all these clues. Because as he says in the big scene on the cliffs, when the girl brings him up through that sort of cave, and he and Howie, as he and Christopher Lee confront each other, the words that Christopher says are the clue to really what the whole thing is about. The game is over. The hunting the hunter, and of course the thinking behind what Tony Shaffer, who was one of the great games players I've ever known, and wrote probably the most important and amusing and brilliant play about games playing called Sleuth. He saw it as a game, I saw it as a game, but it's much more than a game. There are, I hope you'll agree, it's it's a comedy, a black comedy. And you know, life is like that sometimes. It's a very black comedy sometimes. And in this case, it was one that has an appalling ending, appalling from the point of view of poor Edward Woodward's Howie.
But originally, British Lion, they decided this film was hellishly difficult to market, was what they said. Was there a conspiracy? What was going on? Why wasn't this released on its own behalf? Why was it?
Its own merits. Well, it wasn't. It was in the middle. It was made for political expediency because Shepperton, that was a big studio, is still a big studio, which was owned by British Lion, and it would have been worth much more as land for housing. And that was a period in British economic history called, asset stripping. It's what the Prime Minister Heath at the time called the unacceptable face of capitalism. And the trade union there, of the film trade union, were prepared to do almost anything to stop the studio being closed and building work going on instead. And those on the board of the company who didn't want to close the company down had to make a film. And they looked around for a script, and there sitting on the desk was the Wicker Man. And so someone quickly signed a check, and that was it. There's never been an easier financing of an independent picture. And I think that it was, I don't think any thought was really given into whether it would be a good film or a bad film. They had already, under Peter Snell's excellent guidance, made a wonderful film, which is Don't Look Now, by Nick Rogue, a terrific film. And it would have been very difficult to fire Peter Snell as producer, managing director of the company, based on his record at that point. But along comes the Wicker Man, which they think, I can't understand in the first place. No idea what's going on. It's got nudity and all sorts of things that they didn't recognize as proper to a horror film. And so they found it quite easy to say it was undistributable. And of course, when Christopher Lee took the film, furious at the way it was being treated in the internal politics of the company, took the film to Paris, entered it for the Film Fantastique Festival, won the Grand Prix, and probably the best review that I shall ever get from Variety, which is the house magazine of the entire profession. It was very difficult for him not to have the film distributed, but he deliberately downgraded it. I mean, Michael Dealey, who was the executive concerned, by making it a second feature. And that's why it got cut, why those scenes got cut, because they had to be cut to make the film shorter than Don't Look Now. And so about 5 or 6 minutes or whatever came out.
And you were locked out of that?
We were locked out of the, yes, out of the cutting room when that was being done. But we'd already finished the film, and the prints had gone out to distributors in the United States. And that is how we were first able to restore the film in the United States based on a print that...
This is the Corman print.
Roger Corman print, absolutely, yeah. And we had to do it, though, by what today's standards is a very primitive process. It was done by the liquid gate process, which meant we had to make internegatives of each single frame of the 5 minutes, and that's a lot of frames. It wasn't anything like as good a result as Canal Plus have achieved here, because, of course, they've had the advantage of all the digital techniques we've had in the last 40 years, which make these things rather easy, and colorists, who can literally change the colors of a whole scene. and therefore match the material. I've never really in the case of the American reconstruction, I've never really worried very much about the fact that obviously, having gone through all these internegatives, it's very grainy. And so is this a bit grainy? It's bound to be. I mean,
Well, there's sections in there that come from a distribution
Yes.
print, so,
but it's all right.
yeah.
And I think most audiences accept the images because they see them as night images. And sometimes, you know, there's a slight loss of sharpness and focus at night when you're looking out of a window into the garden. I mean, and as for examining snails,